So advertising performs both short-term and long-term functions. So what are the short-term functions? It basically creates an awareness, generates leads, increase the sales, and supports product launches. And what are the long-term functions? It actually creates the right image. Every company wants to create an image for its brand, and they want to create the right image, and they want to develop customer trust, they want to enhance brand equity, they want to do so many things. That is the right brand communication. Now I'll give you an interesting example here what advertising and brand communication does. That I used to work. So when I was working in the industry, my director had a Mercedes. So one day he told me, I saw him, he didn't come with his Mercedes. I mean, he was not driving the car. So I asked him, so what happened? Where's your Mercedes? He said, oh, there's some small technical defect and it has actually gone back to the agency and to the workshop, and I'll get it by tomorrow or day after. Now just imagine a Mercedes, it's a technical defect. Now let's assume it would have been some South Korean brand or something else, or even a Chinese car. People would have said, "Oh, obviously it's Chinese, it's South Korean, not so reliable, it's junk." That's the common perception. That's what advertising helps create in the minds of the consumers. So when it's Mercedes, even if there is a problem, it's just a technical glitch. You are willing to your mind is conditioned in such a way that you are willing to believe that Mercedes is a very reliable and it's a trustable car. It's a very reliable car. It's a high quality. No problems can there won't be any problems, or no problems can occur in a brand like Mercedes. And if it does, maybe because of some software malfunction or some technical glitch, you are not willing to say that the car has developed a snag. There's a problem with the car. Whereas if it would have been some other brand, you would have easily said, oh, yes, oh, these brands are like that. South Korean brands are like that. Chinese brands are like that. They are bound to develop some problem. So this is the perception which is created over a period of time with advertising. Look at, if we consider a brand such as Apple, Nike or Amul, their advertising does much more than sell product. So Nike doesn't sell product directly. It doesn't say that buy our product. Just do it. Look at Apple. Apple is not selling the product directly. Neither is Amul. If you look at Amul ads, they are very nice. We have the Amul girl, and that's an iconic Amul girl. And every uh, matter related with the current affair, we will see that iconic girl, and you will see a very witty slogan or a tagline or a phrase by that particular girl, and that enhances and builds the brand image. So it reinforces the identity. That is what the brand is trying to convey. Many people are confused between the word brand image and identity. Identity is what the company is trying to convey about the brand, whereas image is what the consumers have in their mind. So, perfect advertising and branding is when identity and brand image, they have a perfect overlap. So, what the company is trying to convey is what the company believes. See, there's a very interesting example of uh, the unquality corporation. In my previous sessions, I have mentioned about Al Rice and Jack Trout. They have written multiple books, positioning the battle of your mind, marketing warfare, and a few others. You know, in one of their books, they write about something called as the unquality corporation. Now, they say that why do we have this perception as consumers? Why do we have this perception that some brands are not of a good quality, whereas some brands are of very good quality? Why do we have this perception? Is there any brand in this world which advertises, which communicates, and says that no, our brand is the is a of poor quality? Please buy from us, or please don't buy from us. We are of poor quality. Don't buy from us. There is no brand in this world which says this. Yet we have this impression that some brands are very good, some brands are of very high quality, and some brands are poor quality. Japanese brands are of superior quality. German brands are of superior quality. Chinese brands are of poor quality. But that is not a case. So it's all about, the country of origin, perceptions, the brand image. There's so many things which are at play. But advertising always tries to create a favorable impression. But along with other tools of brand communication. But sometimes it may succeed and sometimes it does not succeed. And that is why we have this perception that some brands are of poor quality and some brands are very good quality and some brands are just merely what I would say mediocre. So advertising does play a very, very important role in fostering these. So advertising can have both short-term goals and long-term goals. So it enhances brand equity. Brand equity is a concept which I'll elaborate upon at a later stage. The only thing is, at this point of time, for your understanding, as students of marketing, brand equity is something which is, in other words, can be said as brand value, the value of the brand, which actually helps the marketer easily sell, promote, and advertise their product. And obviously, this results in a, I should say, uh, better profit margins because most of the products are generic. For example, if it's a mobile phone, and if you put the brand name, let's say Samsung, and if you put the brand name, let's say Carbon or a Lava. So Carbon, Lava, because of their brand names, having the same functionality, having the same features, having the same motherboard, having the same chipset, will not be able to command a premium in the marketplace. So brand equity is the premium that you are able to command in the marketplace just because of the brand name. So you have sunglasses. So you have Oakley sunglasses, you have Ray-Ban sunglasses, you have Porsche sunglasses, and lots of others, Fendi and so on. I mean, these are all fashion brands, luxury fashion brands, which also manufacture fashion accessories. So you'll find their belts and you'll find their, wallets and so on and so forth. But let's talk of Ray-Ban. Ray-Ban is an out-and-out sunglass brand. How much does it take? If I were to ask this question, how much does it take for Ray-Ban to create or produce a sunglass, a generic sunglass like that? So probably 300, 400, 500 rupees. Maybe the glasses are very high quality. Maybe the rims are gold plated. So probably let's say 800 rupees. So that's the cost of manufacturing. But the product is selling for 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 rupees. So the premium is because of the brand name. If tomorrow the same sunglass manufactured by the same company does not have a tag Ray-Ban, it has something else. Let's say the tag is big boy or big man or something else. It could be ZZ, whatever. Just and which people have not heard of. Nobody is going to pay premium. The premium is there because of the brand, and that is because of the brand equity. And advertising helps create that brand equity. So, as students of marketing, you will learn all these things in great detail at later stages to some extent in the advertising course and probably when you take up courses like brand management. And obviously, what does advertising do? When it creates an equity, it also creates a demand for the product and it creates competitive advantage because a product which is said to have high brand equity always is a source for competitive advantage. Look at aircraft engines. They are manufactured by Rolls-Royce. The very few companies in the world which manufacture aircraft engines. So there is Pratt and Whitney, there is Rolls-Royce. So majority of the Airbuses that we see, or I should say Airbus, they have a tie-up with Rolls-Royce. So it is a competitive advantage. They don't allow anybody else to enter the market. Why? The brand name is so differentiated in terms of quality, trust, reliability, precision. It becomes a barrier for other companies to enter the market. So, a brief recap of what we have been discussing till now. Modern marketing is built around the STP framework. S stands for segmentation. So, the art of dividing or the science of dividing the market into meaningful groups. And then once you have divided them into groups, you have to decide which of these groups are we going to target. So will it be undifferentiated marketing? Will it be concentrated marketing? Or we'll have different products for different categories, for different segments that we have. We'll have different, and each one of them will be different. So it will ultimately be your choice whether you are going to target one segment, two segment, three segment, or a combination, or a few of them, or all of them. It all depends. It all depends on your overall strategy and objectives. Then comes positioning, and we have been discussing positioning. Positioning is just how a brand is positioned in the minds of the consumers, and we have discussed this in previous classes also. That positioning is the space in the mind of the consumers. It could be vis-a-vis value, it could be vis-a-vis quality, it could be different attributes, the benefits, the product type, the product associations, everything. So advertising becomes important. After positioning has been decided, its role is to communicate. So once we have decided all these things, the STP has been decided upon, that our positioning will be premium and our product will cater to the premium segment. Let's assume that the company has decided this. So advertising becomes important in the sense that advertising has to convey this in the form of their brand communication, that this is a premium brand. And why does a company, it has to also justify that why does a company command a premium. And that could be because of the brand name, that could be because of the product exclusivity, that could be because of the product design. So there can be numerous examples. A luxury watch targets affluent consumers and positions itself around prestige and exclusivity. So advertising will reinforce that positioning through imagery, messaging, and media selection. So we can always think in terms of some famous brands. What are they known for? Like, for example, brands like Tesla, that is known for innovation. Brands like Apple, they are known for innovation. So what comes to your mind when you say Apple? You think of innovation. When we say 3M, you think of innovation. And when you say a brand like Volvo, what comes to your mind? Volvo stands for safety. And Volvo, over the years, is said to be the most safe car or the safest car. Why? Because they are at the forefront of designing safety mechanisms in the car, whether it was the airbags, or whether it was the SRS, or whether it was the ABS. It is basically Volvo which has been at the forefront. So Volvo cars are said to be the safest cars in the world. So people often say innovation, design, or premium quality. These personal perceptions are examples of positioning. Positioning is the consumer have in their mind. So in terms of safety, people have a ladder. And who is at the top of the ladder? Volvo. In terms of innovation, Apple, probably a Tesla. Reliability, a Toyota. Safety, a Toyota. Luxury, a Louis Vuitton, Rolls Royce, Rolex, Chopard, Bulgari, many other brands. Affordability, when you think of affordability, what comes to your mind? Carrefour, Walmart, IKEA. These are affordable brands where a middle class person can easily walk and buy. Macy's, a lot of other departmental stores across the world. They're known for affordability, value for money products and pricing. Sustainability, brands like Patagonia, brands like Mama Earth, and there are many other brands in India also and worldwide also which are known for this. For so they have their exclusive image and positioning in the minds of the consumer. So what does advertising do? Advertising helps create, strengthen, and maintain these perceptions in the minds of the consumers. Consistent communication over many years actually help consumer associate brands with specific benefits and values. So, for example, once again going back, Volvo is safety. Coca-Cola is cola. Everybody associates Coca-Cola. If I go back in time, I remember my aunts and my mom, I'm talking of the 80s and the 90s, for them, Coca-Cola came to be associated with a particular type of color. So when I was a small child, sometimes I would accompany my mom when she went to the market, probably when she wanted to buy some dress material. So I still remember the shopkeeper would ask, ma'am, which color? And she would say, Coke color dikhana. So what does it mean? It means that the brand has become synonymous. Like example, Mobil oil. Now, Mobil is a brand, but in India, the name Mobil oil has become generic. Surf. Any blue detergent powder is Surf. Any blue bar soap is Rin. Any refrigerator is Fridge. By the way, many people think fridge is a short form of a refrigerator. That is not the case. The first company to manufacture refrigerators in the world was a company called as Frigidaire. So the short form of Frigidaire is fridge, not the short form of refrigerator. That's another story that Frigidaire is not there as a company anymore. It has been overtaken by so many other companies and it had lost its relevance. It has shut shop. But the word fridge comes from Frigidaire, not from refrigerator. See, this is the power of branding. So ultimately, this may lead to certain problems also. In India, Lifebuoy, any bar soap was Lifebuoy. Any yellow color soap or detergent powder was Nirma. So this is how it is. Names become generic. Any toothpaste was called as Colgate. People would wake up and say, Colgate kar liya. That meant, yeah, any mineral water is in India is called as Bisleri. But Bisleri de dena. When you go to a shop, you ask him Bisleri, he can give you anything. So mineral water is basically a synonym for Bisleri. So that is what advertising does. But that's another story for a course called as brand management, that too much of such associations can also be harmful for brands. So moving ahead, let's look at the advertising across the consumer journey. Okay, so we look at advertising across the consumer journey, which is there on the slide. So consumers rarely purchase immediately after seeing an ad. So it's not so that the consumer sees anything. What does advertising actually do? Advertising doesn't make the consumer buy immediately. So in some cases, it may be so when the objective of advertising is to precipitate sales. So that is, we have been discussing 50% off, up to 70% off, 80% off, 90% off, buy one, get one free. The idea is to precipitate immediate sales generally. So this is part of the sales promotion campaign. But long-term advertising does not focus on precipitating sales, immediate sales. It focuses on building the brand, creating the right impressions in the minds of the consumers, creating positive attitudes about the brand. So consumers rarely purchase immediately after seeing an ad. So once they see an ad, once the consumer is exposed to an ad, he doesn't buy the product immediately. Instead, they move through a journey. And what is this journey? Sometimes it is mentioned in many textbooks as the IDAS model. I've already very briefly referred to this particular model earlier also. So I'll do that once again. So what exactly is this IDAS model? This is basically, there are similar models like hierarchy of effect model. They are more or less the same. What they try to convey to us as academics and as students of marketing is that what happens when somebody is exposed to an ad for the first time, let's say. So the first thing, when you are exposed to an ad, it could possibly lead to something called as awareness. You you or the consumer first becomes aware of the brand. That's the best part, or that's the first part. Let me put it this way: you become aware of the brand. You had not heard of the brand. Suddenly, you become aware of the brand. Why? Because you have been exposed to some sort of brand communication, and most likely it is advertising. It could be something else also, some other form of brand communication. But generally, it is advertising. Since we are talking of advertising, so advertising creates an awareness about the brand. Suddenly, you become aware of a brand, and probably after seeing the ad has been made in such a way, it creates the right impact in the mind of the consumer. So it arouses, the interest of the consumers. And when it arouses the interest of the consumer may search for more information about that particular brand. He may seek more information, he may visit stores, he may search. The first thing these days is to, I should say, search it on the internet with the help of AI. It has become much more easier to search about products. Google was the go-to, but nowadays Google has also got artificial intelligence capabilities and it has improved for the better. So consumers search for information, and probably he finds information which is pleasing. He likes that information. There's a reformation that the brand that he's thinking of is actually a good brand and it does satisfy the needs that he has, or the wants or the desires that he may have. So once this happens, it kindles a desire for the brand. So they develop a preference of, fine, this brand seems to work for me. This is good. It is better than the rest of the brands. Now, I mean, I would want to buy it. Then the consumer actually makes a purchase. And once they've made the purchase, it's reflected in something called as brand loyalty. What do we mean by brand loyalty? Positive word of mouth advertising. So consumers also, a best form of advertising is said to be word of mouth advertising. Like, for example, movies. No amount of advertising by the producer or the director would actually convince the consumer to watch. But how does this work? The trickle down effect is very, very fast. People go for the first show and they come out and they say, yeah, the movie is super, it's perfect. I mean, it's the kind of movie that I would want to watch. And within hours it has percolated down to the masses. So this is called as word of mouth advertising. So word of mouth advertising is the best form of advertising, but in certain product categories it works very, very slowly. And the trickle down effect is very, very slow. In movies, it's very fast, especially with the advent of social media. In earlier times also, at movies, the trickle down was very, very fast. Within 1 or 2 days before the advent of internet, people would know that a movie is good or bad, and people would start flocking the cinema halls. So word of mouth advertising is a result of loyalty. A satisfied customer who's happy with the product after buying the product, he becomes a loyal brand ambassador, and he advertises about the product to his friends, to and he is through social media posts. So he creates word of mouth, favorable word of mouth for the brand. Then he repeat purchase the product. So there's something called as repeat purchase. He likes the product, he's satisfied with the product, and he keeps on repeating the product over and over. He keeps on buying the product over and over again. So, example, let's say I like Airtel. I am subscribed to Airtel. I think Airtel is very good. So I am a satisfied customer. Somebody asks me which brand should you I buy, whether it's Geo or any other rival or competitor of Airtel. I always say Airtel because Airtel seems to work for me. I think it's a very good brand. It has got nice connectivity. I mean, very reasonably priced. Similarly, I like to travel by, Vistara. Vistara seems to be good for me. It works for me. So I always endorse Vistara. International airlines, I always say Emirates. Etihad is also equally good. So I've traveled by these airlines and I always recommend them, right? So I'm a satisfied customer. Similarly, in terms of hotels and in terms of service operators, I mean, if the service is good, you would always tend to recommend them. For example, if I go to Missouri or if I go to Srinagar, if I go to Pahalgam or if I go to Ooty or if I go to let's say Darjeeling, if I've stayed somewhere and I find that hotel very good and I find the service provider very good, I always take down their numbers, their visiting cards. If I find a restaurant very good, I always come back and recommend. So that's what you call as a brand loyal customer. So this is what advertising does. So basically, different form of advertising is needed as different stages. So when you want to make the consumer or your audience aware of advertising or of the brand, you advertise in a different way. The kind of advertising would be to draw the attention of the audience so that they are able to understand what this brand is all about. Similarly, if it is creating an interest, the advertising would be different. If it is to kindle the desire for the brand, the advertising will be different and to build a brand preference. Similarly, if you want to create, let's say, satisfaction, so you will have advertising which will be different. So advertising is different over the different stages of the consumer journey. Now, once said, I mean, advertising is a source of competitive advantage. Okay. So, advertising helps build differentiation. It helps build an emotional connect with the audience. It becomes a barrier to entry. In many cases, what happens, the advertising creates a brand image, and that brand image actually leads to some sort of barrier. And when that barrier is there, like for example, I've told you about Rolls Royce, aircraft engines, Pratt and Whitney, aircraft engines. It's a barrier to entry. Apart from technological expertise, the impression that consumers have in the mind about these two brands is that Rolls Royce is very high precision. They manufacture high precision engines. Now, I have a friend who's afraid of air travel. So he keeps on telling me, he says that, I mean, if there's a puncture in your car, if you're traveling and there's a puncture in your car, you can always park your car and you can change the tire. But he says that there's a puncture in the aircraft engine, there's nothing that you can do. You're going to end up losing your life. So the concept of what does it tell us? It tells us that aircraft engines have to be or they should be very high precision engines. So you cannot, because you cannot have defects. You cannot take the risk. You need to have high precision engines which do not fail. Obviously, they do sometimes, but the risk of That is the lowest. Air travel is said to be the safest form of travel. So the risk of an aircraft crashing is very, 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 very small as compared to the risk of an automobile accident or a train accident. It is higher as compared to aircrafts. So in aircraft, coming back to the topic, in aircraft, you cannot have that. So we have heard of different concepts called as Six Sigma or total quality management or zero defect. So actually, what is Six Sigma? Six Sigma is an n number of defects per million. Some 3.6 defects, that is the acceptable. But with aircrafts, that is not acceptable. There is the concept of zero defect. If it's a maternity ward, so out of 1 million babies which are born, the nurse drops 3.6 and the 3.0. So that is acceptable? No. It has to be zero defect. Same is the case with airline. So high precision. So it creates a barrier to entry. So everybody knows that no, no, no. I mean, we are going to have lives of passenger at risk. So there's valuable cargo. It can create so much of damage. We are not going to go with other engine manufacturers. We're only going to go with uh, Rolls-Royce or Pratt & Whitney. So brands can very easily be copied, features can be copied, prices can be matched. That is what brands like Carbon, Lava, Realme, Poco, Xiaomi, Redmi, MI. What are these brands doing? They're actually copying everything. So if you buy a Xiaomi phone or if you buy a Realme phone or if you buy a Poco phone, you'll find that it has features which even surpass a Samsung mobile phone because they are mostly Android based. Apple obviously is not Android based, so they are Android based. So technical technology can be replicated. But what is that something which is very hard to copy? It is the brand name because tangible can easily be copied. Intangibles cannot be copied. So brand image is something which cannot be copied very easy. It takes a lot of time. What exactly? I mean, I always tell my students, every student who takes up my marketing class, I always tell him, what does it take to manufacture something like Coca-Cola? So my student would say, oh, there's a secret formula. Fine, there is a secret formula, but what would be the cost of manufacturing? Hardly a rupee, less than a rupee. What is there? Sweetened carbonated water with some coca and some so-called special ingredient. Pepsi doesn't have a special ingredient. Thumbs Up doesn't have a special ingredient. RC Cola doesn't have a special ingredient. Campa Cola doesn't have a special ingredient. They're all cola drinks, more or less similar. So, but why is that Coca-Cola and Pepsi Cola have such a huge global market? It is because they're huge companies with identifiable brand name. Do you know which is the most recognized word in the world? Let me give you a hint. The most recognized word, or the second most recognized word in the world, is Jesus Christ. And the first most recognized is Coca Cola. That is the power of branding. So Coca Cola doesn't sell because it has a secret formula or some super taste. It sells because it has a brand image. And when it has a brand image, that brand image makes it difficult for rivals to enter the market. That is why, at a global level, you only have Coca Cola and Pepsi Cola. There is no other company to rival them. In recent times, because of post COVID, because of the ongoing wars between Israel and other nations, there is some boycott and things like that. That has to some extent affected these brands. But generally speaking, these brands have no peers. So you may have some homegrown competition, but you do not have extensive competition. Worldwide, there's only Coca Cola and Pepsi Cola which rule the roost. Pepsi was very, very popular. Coca Cola is the world leader. Pepsi Cola was the leader in only one geographic area, and that was the Middle Eastern region. So the reason are obviously in Middle East people think that Coca-Cola is owned by some Jewish company, and historically there has been a lot of animosity between the Arabs and the Jews. That's some political thing that we are not going to go into at this point of time. But nevertheless, it affected the sale of Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola is not very popular in the Middle East. Pepsi Cola is very popular, but elsewhere in the world, Coca-Cola is the market leader. So the only geographical region where Pepsi Cola is number one is the Middle East. So what is harder to copy? It is the brand image. It is the consumer trust. It is the emotional connection that you have with the consumers. I mean, there are so many bikes which are better than Harley Davidson, but Harley Davidson is Harley Davidson. Why? Because it has an emotional connection with the consumers. Advertising helps build these intangible assets. So, the source of competitive advantage, always remember, as students of management, the source of competitive advantage is never the tangible assets. Tangible assets can always be procured. Like, for example, men, material, machine, they can easily be, in most of the cases, they can always be replaced and they can always be, you know, arranged. But it is only the intangible asset, the goodwill, the consumer trust, the brand image. This is not easy to replicate. Nobody can replicate. So that has been built over a period of time. So brands like Tata, what does Tata do that others cannot do? Others are also manufacturing automobiles, even better than Tata in India. But Tata is a brand name which is irreplaceable. It stands for quality, trust, reliability, so many things. So, as we have been discussing, Coca Cola is a brand which has no rivals apart from Pepsi Cola. Everywhere that you go, every country that you would go to or a geographical region, you will find there would be some homegrown, like for example, RC Cola. In Saudi Arabia, we had some other cola brand like Mecca Cola. So they have regional competition, but no global competition apart from Coca Cola and Pepsi Cola. It is because of the decades that they have spent in advertising and brand building.